webinars, live shows, all about creating unforgettable events. I'm Phil Mershon. I'm the author of the book, Unforgettable, The Art and Science of Creating Memorable Experiences. And today, we're going to talk about how do you unlock the secrets to creating an unforgettable event. As we get going, I'd like you to step back in time and think about an event. It could have been a conference, it could have been a concert, it could have been something else like a party, a gala, a wedding, you name it, a point in time where if you think back on that event, you still get goosebumps. You might get a tear in your eye. It creates this burning in your gut because that was one of those moments that stands out from all other moments. I'm going to tell you a story that we'll use as a frame today. It was probably about 10 years ago. I was at a music theater show in Wichita where I live, Music Theater Wichita. It's a regional but nationally recognized music theater company. And they were doing the show Sweet Charity. And I'll never forget this. Sweet Charity is a simple, fun story. It's about a businessman who falls in love with a showgirl. And most of the show is lighthearted dialogue and a story of how they fall in love. At the end of the show, though, right before the final number, the main character, the man, starts asking himself a series of questions. He's starting to doubt himself if he should go and propose, if he should deepen the relationship with this woman, because he's asking himself, am I worthy of her love? And it hit me in that moment of that is a universal question that almost every man that I know at some point in his time, in his life, has asked that question. And I felt like I wish they would have stopped the show and given us a moment to ponder that, maybe turn to a neighbor and discuss that, because it was such a weighty question. And the way they presented it felt like time had stood still. And that's what I want you to think about. How do you create moments where it feels like time stands still? That is what we're going to try to do. And that's where I recognized events, that is the goal. That is what I'm trying to do at conferences and events that I create. I want to have those moments where there's an aha, that moment where there's this sense of transformation, this sense of, I remember that moment, and that is when I pivoted. That is what Unforgettable is all about. So, how do we unlock that? What are some things that we want to do? And I was going to grab a sticky note, but we all know what a sticky note is, and it's made by the company 3M, right? 3M creates sticky notes. And what we're trying to do is create events that are sticky in people's brains and reminds them of those moments that were unforgettable, that leads them to remember the things that they decided in those moments. So here are the 3Ms. I want you to think about the company 3M, and here is the unforgettable framework: memorable, meaningful, momentous. You want to write that down? You can. Memorable, meaningful, momentous. Let's break that down. So by memorable, what do I mean? Obviously, is what it sounds like. You want it to be something that sticks in people's minds, that they're going to remember it, they're going to talk about it when they think about that event, whatever event it is, that show, that conference, that wedding. They're going to remember a specific moment. And some of the ways that you make that happen are a couple. One is you do something that is completely unexpected. I was talking to a business leader in Wichita this week, and he talked about a winter show they do every year where there is literal snow falling down in the middle of the show. They have an indoor fireworks show. Imagine the first time you're going to this event and there's snow coming down inside of the building. And then they're doing this indoor fireworks show. That's something that is completely memorable and unexpected. Savannah Bananas are really good at this. They combine things that are usual and create something that is unusual. And this is one of the secrets to creating memorable things, because literally the philosopher said there's nothing new under the sun. And that's actually true, but we can create things that feel new by bringing two things together that becomes something that stands the test of time. If you think about the Savannah Bananas, if you're familiar, which they're almost becoming a household name these days. I see them being advertised on ESPN. Well, what they do is they take something like, they've got a pitcher who happens to be a rodeo cowboy, and he goes out and lassos. So he pitches, he's wearing his overalls. He's actually now on their fireman team, but he still does this. He will pitch wearing his overalls, and then Once the runners are on base, he pulls out his lasso and he tries to catch them running between first and second base. Now, lassoing is totally cool. Pitching is totally cool. He's a good pitcher. Otherwise, he wouldn't be on the team. But all of a sudden, you've got a rodeo show meets a baseball show, and it's something that is unforgettable. Every night of their game, they're doing something like that that makes their show stand out. When you walk away from one of those games, there's going to be some story that you're going to remember that was every time you think of the Savannah Bananas. What are you doing at your show? Here's the third way that you make something memorable. Use the senses, particularly the ones that we don't normally use. So at events, we're used to using sound and we are used to using sight. Those are the two things that we tap into normally, and those are good. If you only use one, I think the rate of remembering is in the 30%, and it gets up into the 60% when you use those two. But when you use all five, now we're getting into the 90th percentile of people's likelihood to remember what happened. And the number one sense that we need to focus on is scent, the olfactory, that sense of smelling. And that could be good or bad. I love to tell the story of when I lived in Kenya for 7 months. I lived next to a sugar plantation. And on that sugar plantation, they use sulfur in the refining process. And if you're familiar, sulfur smells like rotten eggs. To this day, if I smell sulfur, I immediately am transported to that moment over 30 years ago, nearly 40 years ago, when I was living in that village, smelling the sugar refinery and eating bananas because I got sick to my stomach. Both of those smells and tastes come back to me immediately when I smell that. That's a negative. That's a terrible smell, but you can do that in a positive way. When people smell coffee, who do they think of? There's a specific scent that Starbucks tries to use in their store. All right, so that's memorable. Let's move on to meaningful. This is when it is highly personal. You've heard the term choose your own adventure. When you can create an event where people feel like this was made for me, they really understand who I am. So that tells you something. You need to get to know who the audience is. One of the biggest problems we have when we're designing events is we design events for ourselves. So we need to design an event for the people who are coming to the event. And so get to know them, use data, talk to them, form focus groups, get on phone calls, start to understand what they're looking for as it relates to what you're doing. Obviously, if it's a wedding, you want to plan a wedding that's for you, but you want the audience, the people who are coming to celebrate with you, not to get bored, not to feel like, oh, this is just a show to showcase who they are. There is a part of that. But when you're at a conference, we want to serve the people who are coming to that conference with the content they want, the ability to make connections like they want. So that's what it means to be meaningful. And we're also looking at their journey. What does it look like to be Sally? And I like to use the name Sally as the metaphor of someone who buys a ticket to a conference, and she's sitting at home. She looks online at your information and she puts her credit card down and says, I am going. She goes out and buys her plane ticket, books her hotel room. What's happening for Sally at that moment in time? What are you doing? Are you just sending her a receipt, or are you starting to feed her information that's going to help prepare her for the experience that you're creating? Because that is when her journey starts, right at that moment of purchase. Now, if it's 9 to 12 months away, you don't need to do a lot. Just remind her how excited you are to see her. Maybe every month or two, you send her a note saying, hey, we're excited. Couple 2 to 3 months before, welcome her into the community. Start to get to know her, introduce her to other people. If it's her first time, begin introducing her to others. So you're understanding the journey before and then during the event. What does it look like to arrive, to have your first impression at registration, your first session, the party, each step of the way through the event? And then the part that most of us are not very good at is what happens after the event is over. So that journey is totally meaningful because we're doing it for a person, what they are going to get out of it, and we're thinking about the steps of the way. The third part of the 3M unforgettable model. So we have already talked about memorable, meaningful, and now we're going to talk about momentous. And by momentous, what I'm talking about is moments. Chip and Stan Heath wrote a book called The Power of Moments. And what they were trying to understand is, why are some moments more memorable than others? Why do some moments stand out? And that's very much what I'm talking about here. How do we orchestrate those moments that people are going to remember? We can't focus on every moment within our event. If we do, none of them will be meaningful because we put so much effort into all of them that we actually diffuse the experience. So we want to focus on those moments that actually matter, that people are going to remember, that will move the needle. So one of my friends is Caroline Correa. She talks about focusing on three. Pick your big three moments, put a majority of your budget and effort into those three moments because you know those are the moments that are going to lift the tide. Disney does this. They don't focus on every moment. They know there's some parts of their experience that aren't great. You don't want to pay 2 to 3 times the normal price of a Coke or a hot dog. You don't want to stand in long lines. Now they've given you lightning passes and things that you can pay extra to avoid those pain points. But they focus on those things that they know are going to stand out when you remember, no matter if you're 6, 12, 18, or a parent or a grandparent, they are thinking about you and your journey. So how far do you have to go to get a trash can? That's a pain point. Who do you want to meet? If they can get to know you and you want to meet Goofy or Cinderella or whoever, and your kid's having a birthday, they can design a special experience for you. They know that fireworks show at the end is one of those things that's going to stand out. Being able to ride your favorite ride is another one of those things. And so they focus on, let's make those great experiences as great as we possibly can. That will outweigh some of the negative experiences. We can do the same thing within our events. Let's pick those moments that are going to matter. And I would argue first impressions, last impressions are two of those that you should think a lot about. And then what are those peak moment or moments in between that you want to emphasize? So memorable, make it memorable, make it something that's going to be sticky in their brain. They're going to think back and they're going to remember specific things about your event. Meaningful, you're designing the event for specific people. You're thinking about their journey. Momentous, now you're thinking about the moments that actually matter. If we go back to that story that I told up front, why was that event memorable? I talked to the artistic director of the show because I wanted to know, what did he do? How did he make that moment happen? Surely there's something he was doing with the music and lights and the acting. And you know what he told me? He said, Phil, I didn't do that. What I did is I told a great story. And if you were to come back to that event time and time again, there would be different moments that would stand out to you. But because of where you were that night and the story that was being told, you had that moment where you were transfixed. And if we tell great stories, it will stand out. So tell a story in a way that people will remember it. Tell a story that people will hear it because you understand who they are, and tell a story so that you focus on moments that actually are going to matter, that they're going to connect to and will stand the test of time. And when you do all these things, your events will become increasingly unforgettable. And as they become unforgettable, they will become transformational. If you want to learn more, reach out to me, phil@philmershon.com. I'd love to get on a discovery call with you to see if I can help your event or learn about what you're doing as a speaker. I help speakers become unforgettable. I help events become unforgettable. Go and have an amazing day.